All right, let's go deeper and look at some of the details surrounding this national effort to upgrade school buses. Ben Prochazka is the executive director of the Electrification Coalition. He joins us now on the Why. Thank you for your time. I know you said your mission is to really electrify everything that moves. For school buses, districts can either opt for electric buses or fossil fuels like propane. We saw cleaner diesel at as little as a third of the cost. So my first question to you is, why go electric?
Great. Well, thank you for having me this morning. So excited to be a part of the discussion. I'm as a parent of two children who get on a diesel bus every morning. This is something that I feel every day. And so, look, there's the health impacts. It's one of the reasons that we need to do this. And ultimately, at the end of the day, an electric bus is the only vehicle that's going to have zero tailpipe emissions. But for us, and the organization, the reason we work on this right now is the economic and national security impacts of our oil dependency. And so school buses are a perfect example of highly inefficient vehicles for fossil fuel use. And if we can start plugging these in, we're not only going to save school districts money on the long term, we're going to protect children's health, but we're also going to help eliminate those national security and economic security impacts of oil dependency.
Yeah, and there's something to be said, having covered about greenhouse gas emissions in the past, the EPA citing transportation as a main, part of the wedge when it comes to emissions. And of course, we know how crucial school buses are when it comes to that. I'm curious, though, with that being said, are there potential downfalls when it comes to, converting into an electric type situation?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, there's a learning curve that's going to have to take place with school districts, right? They've been operating diesel buses for a long time, or their contractors have. And so that's going to take a little bit of a transition. And it's part of the reason that there need to be early stage incentives, is because when you sort of start that early transition, costs are higher. We haven't reached scale, right? The manufacturing hasn't reached scale. So the cost of batteries are higher. But the other part of this is we're going to get off of that peak and valley that exists with oil and gas prices. And so we've seen that fluctuate and go from $2 a gallon to $5 a gallon, in some cases more, some cases less. Those peaks and valleys are bad for planning, bad for school districts. And the idea of plugging into the grid is electricity is highly price stable, right? It doesn't change much over time. And we haven't even gotten into the opportunity for resilience, where school buses can actually act as mobile power sources and provide resilience benefits in districts when we have hurricanes and other impacts. And so, sometimes we need to think through the entirety of what a school bus can provide for a community, not just cleaner and better transportation for our children, but also the opportunity to solve some of these other problems.
Okay, so it could potentially have wider implications. The EPA has $5 billion to convert the school buses. And under the law, half is set aside for electric buses and half for so-called low emissions engines. Here's what the chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee had to say in part. We wanted to share this. And she said, quote, "It's clear from the latest round of funding that the EPA plans to continue to favor electric school buses over propane and compressed natural gas buses." Now, 90% of the applications from school districts are for electric school buses. So do you think the EPA is fairly administering this program?
Yeah, I think ultimately, the opportunity for electric is we get to plug into a grid and power with a diverse set of resources. Versus if we're picking propane or picking natural gas, we're ultimately still dependent then on those individual fuels. And we can then do a much better job of managing costs, managing our resources, ensuring that we're actually cleaning up the way that we power our bus systems. And in the long term, there's going to create cost certainty, right? So each of these things ultimately is going to lead us to better economic impact and better public health impact.
One of the things I was thinking about, of course, as we know, going electric is not specific to school buses. We're seeing the push even with just, cars that we drive in general. And there's been a lot of discussion over the more that you electrify, the more potential pressure there is on the grid. And we've seen in certain states with certain weather conditions that the grid has really been strained. Does that concern you at all? How you want to have this push and transition to electric, but as you say, the scale's not quite there yet. How's the grid supposed to handle it?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that EVs plug into the grid when there's the greatest amount of spare capacity. So it's not a one-to-one kind of moment, right? We're not plugging in a school bus or an electric car at the same time we're turning on our air conditioners or our heaters. And additionally, you can actually see a storm coming. You can see some of those things that are creating some of those challenges in the grid. And you can plan for that. And that's actually a really important value, is that we have the ability to predict for some of those events that might have an impact on the grid. But we do need to do more. We need to build better transmission. We do have some grid upgrades that need to happen. And I think the great thing is, through the Inflation Reduction Act, through the bipartisan infrastructure law, we're able to not only think about how do we electrify school buses, cars, and trucks, but also how do we start to make these grid improvements that are going to make our lives better, to have more access and more opportunity.
And now, earlier in the segment, we heard from, a congressional member basically speaking about the fact that right now it's incredibly subsidized. To be able to see this scale and get to a point, what do you have to say about that transition when that money is not there anymore, and maybe that funding, it changes? How to be able to sustain an effort like this nationally?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the reason that there's a 5-year window on this, is that we're at this early stage of the transition, right? We have almost 500,000 school buses in the U.S. And right now they're hugely inefficient, right? They get 2.5 to 5 miles per gallon. They're spewing diesel fumes into our communities. And so we have to figure out a way to do a better job of cleaning up those buses, but also driving that efficiency, because they use so much diesel. And so while we're in this early stage transition where batteries might be more expensive, where there are higher upfront costs, we have these incentives in place, and slowly those will start to taper down over time. But then we also aren't at a stage where we're thinking through total cost of operation. So yes, it might cost more right now to purchase an electric school bus, but the lifespan of that vehicle is going to save money for the school district. And so that's going to be the important value experience that we're going to start to see with school districts across the country as they electrify.
All right, Ben Prochazka, Executive Director of the Electrification Coalition. Thanks for your insight.
Thank you so much for having me. Love to participate in the discussion.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.